Melancholy is a very short poem and very beautiful indeed among Keats's odes. It is one of his kernel odes in a sense. Sharing the screen, I'll just wait. Okay, so Melancholy, Ode on Melancholy is actually like a kind of snapshot of Keats's system of salvation. Whatever theory Keats believes in, or what are the other odes are actually premised upon. Just wait, someone has requested. হ্যাঁ, তো যেটা বলছিলাম যে Ode on Melancholy is in short a kind of snapshot of what his other odes describe in detail. It is a crystallization of Keatsian philosophy, but here he does not actually give out that kind of bookish philosophy in a kind of doctrinaire manner. He gives us some example after example, and from where he actually infers what he wants to mean. And there was another stanza which he actually omitted or deleted actually from the beginning. So initially the first stanza was different, not this, that initial first stanza did not begin with no no go not to Lithi. So in that stanza which Keats actually deleted, we find that a kind of would-be knight is there. Just a bit, someone requested. Nirmal has joined, okay. So I was talking about the original kind of version, original stanza, which he later on omitted. তো সেখানটা আমরা দেখতে পাই একজন নাইটকে, the knight or would-be knight actually is searching for the goddess Melancholy in a sense. But later on somehow Keats deleted that stanza and begins from no no go not to Lithi. But I would say that it is more dramatic. The first stanza contains some images actually earlier, which might be a kind of macabre for his aesthetic contemplation in a sense. And the whole first stanza is actually a series of do not go somehow. So these are the actually some list of don'ts in a sense. You should not do this and that to find the melancholy. And these are the usual places where one can find for, one can search for melancholy. And Keats completely turns that kind of practice upside down. And look at the way that he begins this first stanza. No, no, go not to Lithi, neither twist wolf's bane, type rooted for its poisonous wine, nor suffer thy pale forehead to be kissed by nightshade, a ruby grape of Proserpine. So here you get three suggestions. The first stanza is a kind of catalogue of suggestions what you should not do in order to find melancholy. So these are the usual places, these are the usual substances or elements that one tends to associate oneself with in order to get that melancholy flavor in a sense, or to get out of melancholy, to put it more bluntly. The first suggestion is go not to Lithi. This is the first suggestion. Lithi, as you already know from Nightingale, it is a river of forgetfulness, oblivion. kind of classical mythology that he introduces here in the first line. It says fondness for Hellenism, one can say. So why should one go to Lethe, that kind of river in Hades? Because you know that if anyone drinks the waters of this river, just wait a bit. Ipshita has joined. তো যেটা আমি বলছিলাম যে লিথি প্রসঙ্গে, যে why should one drink the waters of Lethe? যে the waters of Lethe, if you actually drink it, you will have forgetfulness. It will cause you total oblivion. So perhaps your mind is stricken with sorrow and you want to get rid of it. So in that occasion, you can drink the waters of Lethe and totally get oblivious of those sad events from your mind. Okay, so it is a kind of escape route if you go to Lethe and drink its water. But Keats, very dramatically and very kind of shockingly, here says that addressee, because the addressee is never mentioned, you know, but you can assume the addressee is a kind of knight, a kind of pattern of quest motive one can find out in this whole poem, just as you find that Keats's other poems sometimes contain a kind of quest motive. So you should not do that, the first suggestion. Do that perhaps knight, or you can just say that kind of addressee. Second suggestion, neither twist wolf bane, tight-rooted for its poisonous wine. So up to this is the second suggestion. Wolf's bane. Wolf's bane is a very poisonous plant. Wolf bane is called but known as aconite. It is the name of a poisonous plant. So if you twist wolf's bane to get its juice, to get its poisonous wine, its juice is actually projected by Keats as poisonous wine. So twisting is required if you want to root out, if you want to actually extract its juices. So we have to pull out the kind of poisonous plant and needs to twist it, extract it in order to get its poisonous wine. Means here it's kinds of juice which is called as kind of wine because you are running after it. So to put it very simply, the juice of wolf's bane is a poison. So what is the indication that Keats want to imply? The indication is you can take poison generally and commit suicide. This is not stated openly, but this is actually hinted at what Keats actually tries to mean. So you can extract wolf's bane. That name of the poisonous plant, important for short question, is aconite. ACONITE. Okay. Third suggestion is that nor suffer thy pale forehead to be kissed by nightshade, ruby grape of Proserpine. So nightshade is the name of another poisonous plant whose name is belladonna. Just wait. BELLADONA. Nightshade is belladonna, and this poisonous plant has some red cherries which are equally poisonous. Don't think of Proserpine at first. I shall talk about it later. So just try to understand without thinking of this word Proserpine. Nor suffer thy pale forehead to be kissed by nightshade. So if you want to have a kind of escape from suffering, you can take the poison of belladonna or nightshade or its red berries in a sense. Because in that case, you shall die. You have to commit suicide in a sense to escape from pain. And remember that whenever we are reading Keats's odes, the undercurrent is that Keats never actually enjoins upon to actually go away from kind of suffering or pain. You know this. You have read lots of odes of Keats. So Keats's poetic system does not approve of or admit of a kind of escape from the sufferings or sorrows. But here he does not say that openly. He will talk about it very gradually and very beautifully. As I was saying, that though it is a very short poem, it is exquisite indeed, a kind of immaculate response. So nor suffer thy pale forehead to be kissed by nightshade. So don't let yourself be controlled by that poisonous plant belladonna and its red berries in a sense. If you take that, you will be taken straight to the underworld. This is the suggestion. And in that way, which is Keats's pattern by habit, by flair for mythification, Keats always actually turns to those Greek mythology to sustain his thoughts. That is why Lethe turns up in the first line. And here, another Greek myth or Roman myth actually, Proserpine, turns up. So what is Proserpine or who is Proserpine? Proserpine is the Roman equivalent of the Greek goddess Persephone. So
স্যার প্রসাপিনের কথা আমরা ইয়েতেও পাই না, এরিয়ালে ওই দ্য টেম্পেস্ট শেক্সপিয়ারের।
হ্যাঁ, Proserpine mythের কথা is we got also get there. This myth has been exploited by many writers. Proserpine actually নামটাকে আমরা স্টাডি করি, it means actually half serpent, proserpent. Okay, so Proserpine is, as I was saying, the kind of Roman.
স্যার বলছি ইকোনাইট কথা কি জন্য বলেছিলেন একবার বলবেন?
হ্যাঁ, ইকোনাইট মিন্স হচ্ছে উলফস বেন। হ্যাঁ, এখানে যেটা বলছে neither twist wolf's bane. So neither twist this plant whose name is aconite. But Keats does not say aconite openly, but he is saying wolf's bane in a sense. And tight rooted কেন বলছেন, because those plants have very deep roots on the kind of ground. And আর উলফস পেন যে কারণে বলা হচ্ছে যেটা আমি যতদূর দেখছিলাম, যেটা উলফদের একটা কি ট্র্যাপ হিসাবে the kind of juice of this plant was used earlier. That is why the name wolf's bane is sometimes ascribed to this poisonous plant. আচ্ছা, so Proserpine বা যেটা গ্রিক নেম হচ্ছে Persephone in a sense. So she is in short the goddess of the underworld. বা এর অনেক গল্প রয়েছে যে she was kidnapped by অমুক তমুক, সেগুলো এক্ষুনি প্রয়োজন নেই, এত কিছু দরকার। Just you can understand it in this way that Proserpine is the goddess of the underworld, and if you take kind of red cherries of nightshade, you will straight visit the world of Proserpine. This is the suggestion. To put it very simply, if you take nightshade, you will die. But Keats here is a kind of comic kind of response. In this poem, you can get that kind of the kind of humor of John Keats. This is not generally visible in other odes. Sometimes he is very serious, like Ode to a Nightingale. But here he is a kind of serio-comic mood, in a kind of serio-comic mood. So if you take Nightshade, you will visit straight the world of Proserpine, in a sense. So here you get the three kind of suggestions which Keats repudiates, totally reject করছে, gives wide birth to these suggestions. So a kind of tension arises that what does Keats want to mean? If I reject all those things, which are typically some escape routes from suffering, then how to cope with that? There are some other lines in this first stanza. The next suggestion is, make not your rosary of yew berries. Rosary, a kind of string of beads. So the string of beads is used in Catholic tradition for actually praying, in a sense. So Keats is telling us that don't make a string of beads out of yew berries and count on your past sufferings. Because if you think of your past sufferings by counting on your rosary, your sufferings will be increased, in a sense. So you should not do that. But Keats here is not telling us what to do. He is just saying some list of do nots. So you should not, he is saying. Make not your rosary of yew berries. You should not make a kind of string of beads, a rosary. You have seen that rosaries are actually formed of a kind of yew berries, in a sense. And yew berry, one can find yew berries in the graveyard. It is called a kind of melancholy looking kind of berries, in a sense, the trees, yew trees. So graveyard, the kind of image that uses, that is always, or that is also associated with melancholy, because if one turns up at the graveyard, one encounters some yew trees before the kind of coffins of dead bodies. This is, in a sense, a kind of reworking of the graveyard school of poetry. Perhaps you have read about the graveyard school of poets. Gray's Elegy, those of you who have read, the precursor to Romanticism, a famous elegy written in a country churchyard. There, Thomas Gray actually talks about the plight of the kind of unknown villagers who actually died unknown, in a sense, who lived, who actually had some potentialities in them, but that could not blossom because they did not get actually such kind of opportunities. There was perhaps a Milton or a kind of Hampton, as he said in this way, in that poem. So that elegy of Thomas Gray that initiated a kind of school of criticism, a school of poetry, which is known as graveyard school of poems. Keats is using some of the stocks in trade, commonplaces of graveyard school, only to reject them. Keats's poetry is not an addition to those number of graveyard poems. You have read Gray's Elegy, I think. Apart from there were some other graveyard poets like William Collins, Autumn Evening, etc. So there were a kind of large number of poets who initiated actually the graveyard school. So Keats' suggestion is that you should not make your mind melancholic by perhaps visiting a graveyard, by perhaps thinking of your past sorrows. Because in that way, you cannot escape from suffering. Your suffering will be increased, in a sense. And you should not do other stuffs as well. That you should not drink the waters of Lethe. Because in that case, the effect of melancholy will be antidoted by an antidote. So you should not take that. Nor should you commit suicide. Line number 6. Nor let the beetle nor the death moth be your mournful psyche, nor the downy owl a partner in your sorrow's mysteries. So here you get a kind of reference to beetles, insects, death moth. It is a kind of type of moth with a kind of skull-like pattern on its back, and owl. So these are the three signifiers which if you put them together, just wait, someone has requested. I think you can see the screen right now. So here you get reference of three things: beetle, moth, and owl. And if you put them together, they comprise a kind of world of melancholy. You know about Psyche. You have read about the legend or myth of Psyche in Ode to Psyche. But here, Psyche generally means a kind of personification of the soul, a kind of embodiment of the soul, your mournful Psyche. So Keats is saying that don't let your soul be governed by such melancholic kind of insects and animals. Downy means soft feathered, owls having soft feather. It says eye for minuteness in a sense. Death moth. So death moth যে কারণে বলা হয় যে it is a type of moth যার with a kind of skull like pattern on its body. Beetle. So these are the insects and animals which are associated with the world of gloom, associated with the world of melancholy. So Keats is saying that don't take actually, but don't let these animals and insects overpower you and actually get to you actually a kind of flavor of melancholy. So in a way,
একবার বলবেন
হ্যাঁ
ডেথ মথ আর ডাউনি আউলের এই কোশ্চেনটা
এখানটায় ধরো কিডস এখানে বলছেন যে you should not actually commit yourself to the world of melancholy. That means you should not allow the ominous insects and just wait to request by তো যেটা বলছিলাম nor let the beetle nor the dead moth be your mournful Psyche. Okay, fine. So here Keats is saying that you should not allow the ominous insects or the kind of death watch beetle and the death's moth which are associated with a kind of world of melancholia to represent your sad and depressed soul. Because if you indulge in the thoughts of death and in the thoughts of mourning, in order to get melancholy, you are totally away from its true flavor. Because if you want to search melancholy, you should not visit such things. In a sense, কেন সেটা বলছেন সেটা that will become more clear when we read the second stanza. So Psyche আরেকটা কারণে Psyche use করছে because Psyche, if you take it as a kind of literal thing, then it also means a moth with a kind of butterfly wings. But Psyche is here a kind of represents soul. So don't let your soul be benumbed by actually such typical kind of machineries of melancholy. So Keats is in one way making a kind of sarcastic slap at those graveyard poets also. Remember that those graveyard poets, they used to think of those kinds of deaths of people and used to philosophize upon the kind of spectacle of life. Think of even not graveyard poet, but think of the kind of Act 5, Scene 1 of Hamlet, the grave digger scene, where Hamlet, the kind of typically melancholic person in the graveyard in a sense, and reflecting on the kind of transient nature of man in a sense, in a kind of melancholic mood. But Keats does not advocate such kind of activities. হোয়াই এটা একটু আমি পরে ব্যাখ্যা করছি সেকেন্ড স্ট্যান্ডে গিয়ে, আপাতত ফার্স্ট লাইনগুলো বোঝো। সো আমি আরেকবার এটা এখান থেকে বলছি ফর ইউর ক্লারিফিকেশন। নর লেট দ্য বিটল নট দ্য ডেথ মথ বি ইউর mournful psyche. So your psyche should not be governed by the thoughts of melancholic world, which are here symbolized but actually hinted at by the employments of moth, beetles and owl. Owl is a kind of deemed as a kind of ominous bird. So they should not be a partner in your sorrows mysteries. So you want to feed your sorrows. So that is why you associate yourselves perhaps with some melancholy looking yew trees. You have made a rosary of kind of yew trees, of yew berries, and you are creating a world where you are surrounded by owls, death moths, beetles. So they are your partners. They actually adapt to your melancholic mood. They increase your partake of melancholy. So the poet's suggestion is that you should not betake yourself to melancholy in this manner. Okay, just wait. Next, these are the last two lines of this first stanza. For shade to shade will come to drowsily and drown the wakeful anguish of the soul. To some extent, in the last two lines of the first stanza, he actually clarifies. Why does he say this? Why does he say that you should not do such things in order to get melancholy? Because shade to shade will come to drowsily. Drowsily, a kind of benumbing effect that will be created, and drown the wakeful. That means wakeful is the meaning kind of attentive. In this way that the poet has used this word, wakeful anguish of the soul. Now I shall explain that what he means by this. According to Keats, melancholy is a very rich experience. Its flavor one should relish, and melancholy is not at all associated with this world of ugliness, the world of macabre kind of concatenations. You should totally reject such kind of things which induce, provoke a kind of melancholic mood. If you do that, then your kind of perception of tasting the proper flavor of melancholy will be benumbed. These things, such stocks in trade, are too macabre for his aesthetic contemplation. That is why they should not be introduced. They are totally aloof from the real world of melancholy. Because it says in the second stanza where one can find melancholy, not in these usual places. Generally, if we want to kind of taste melancholy, we shall do such things. But if we want to actually escape from melancholic mood, we shall go for such acts. So every possibilities, either kind of visiting a graveyard, having a kind of lethe water, or committing suicide, all those possibilities which are life denying possibilities in a sense are rejected outright. Keats, you know, is a kind of life affirming poet. He always says yes to life, which great writers of really does. This is his suggestion. This is the beginning of stanza 2. But when the melancholy feet shall fall, sudden from heaven like a weeping cloud, that fosters the droop-headed flowers all, and hides the green hill in an April shroud. Wonderful line these are. So he says that the melancholy, or the effect of melancholy, is a kind of very rich experience. Melancholy has a refreshing effect on our soul. Generally, poets don't say that. Keats was reading a book called Anatomy of Melancholy, written by Barton. You know about this book. So perhaps he got these medical terms from this book, which he introduced in the first stanza, aconite, belladonna, etc. But Keats has used such kinds of, though I have referred to a kind of biographical details. But if you can, if you want to just eliminate those things, you can do that and can relish the poem, the core of this poem, content of this text. So when melancholy feet shall fall, sudden from heaven. So melancholy actually visits us. You can get a kind of visiting by melancholy. How he uses a kind of simile, a kind of comparison to actually explain that how a fit of melancholy swoops on us, falls on us. The effect of melancholy is actually hinted at by this beautiful comparison, which is running for 3 lines, 12 to 14. So first look at this comparison. Weeping cloud that fosters the droop-headed flowers all and hides the green hill in April shroud. April month means it is springtime. Okay. So when clouds send down a kind of shower of rain on earth, and the flowers which are drooping because of lack of water, they get revitalized, they get refreshed, and it is as if this is Keats's kinds of fertile imagination that imagines the cloud as weeping. So the clouds is causing that shower of rain to fall on the ground. So Keats is thinking empathetically as if the cloud is weeping. This is his habit for personification, and he's saying that a weeping cloud that fosters the droop-headed flowers all and hides the green hill, যেন একটা চাদরে যেন সেটা সেই বৃষ্টির চাদরে যেন পুরো flowers গুলো actually in a sense that creates বা forms as a kind of veil, and shroud also connotes a kind of touch of mystery. So Keats here uses a kind of beautiful, exquisite image. So how one can relish melancholy, he wants to say that. But before telling us the details of where melancholy can be found, he just tells us that what is the effect of melancholy on us. That means that when a shower of rain happens, it falls from the sky and the flowers are refreshed. Similarly, when our soul is actually visited by that fit of melancholy, our soul is not depressed, our soul is refreshed. This is what he wants to mean. So melancholy is always
তাহলে ওয়েস্টল্যান্ডের সঙ্গে যেটা হচ্ছে বেরিয়াল অফ দ্য ডেড, এপ্রিল ইজ দ্য ক্রুয়েলেস্ট মান্থ, তাহলে এটা কি কম্পেয়ার করা যেতে পারে সে মেলাঙ্কলির সঙ্গে?
ওয়েস্টল্যান্ডের সাথে দেখো, ওয়েস্টল্যান্ড কিটস লিখছেন পরে, ঠিক আছে, তো সেটা অন্য একটা অ্যাঙ্গেল থেকে লেখা। কিটসের পার্সপেক্টিভ আলাদা, এলিয়টের বিংশ শতাব্দীতে তার পার্সপেক্টিভ আলাদা। সেখানে কম্প্যারিজন আনতে পারো, সেক্ষেত্রে ইট উইল বি আ কাইন্ড অফ contrasting mood in a sense with kind of Eliot, because Eliot has treated the kind of spring setting in a kind of completely different way, and Keats is doing that. But Keats's suggestion is something that is different. It is a kind of quest that he is undertaking as a kind of vicar. Okay, so that fosters the droop-headed flowers. So when the flowers are drooping, the droop-headed flowers, so when they get waters because of rain, they are revitalized, refreshed in a sense. And effect of melancholy is like that, that refreshes our mind. So you should always welcome melancholy, okay, because of such refreshing kind of capacity that it has got. It refreshes the withering sentiments of our heart. These are fourfold suggestions where one can find melancholy. The first is number 15, line number 15 is the first suggestion, number 1, 16 হচ্ছে number 2, 17 হচ্ছে 3, আর 18, 19, 20, this is number 4. These are the 4 places where you can get melancholy. Unusual places. When you read about these suggestions, you are astonished on learning what Keats is actually trying to say. The first suggestion, then glut thy sorrow on a morning rose. Glut means feed. Feed your sorrow on a morning rose. Why should you do that? Morning rose is a kind of exquisite image of beauty. Morning rose. This is the kind of supreme example of a kind of beautiful sight. Rose when it is in bloom, full bloom. So in that way, Keats is saying that there lies melancholy. And we say that, what are you saying? There actually beauty lies. How can you say that melancholy also lies there? But Keats, this is a kind of very mature imagination that makes us imagine that when you contemplate or ponder over the kind of beautiful morning rose, you can come to a realization after a certain point that it is very short-lived. A morning rose, it will not be here for perpetual time. It is transient, it is evanescent in a sense. It is short-lived. So it is the contemplation of beauty that can make us realize or get the flavor of true melancholy, because beauty and melancholy are inseparable. This is Keats's crux. But look, Keats here does not say that in a kind of preaching manner. He is not a preacher. He is not endorsing his concept kind of very openly. He is giving us some examples. So glut thy sorrow, feed on, look at these most beautiful images that you celebrate. And when you look at it, when you are enjoying, you remember that this enjoyment is short-lived. And that makes you realize that within beauty is stored the genesis, the seeds of melancholy. First suggestion. Second suggestion. These are the 4 images of beauty that Keats gives us. This is the real source of melancholy. Line number 16, he's saying that, or on the rainbow of salt sand wave. This is a kind of figure of speech, salt sand. It is alliteration. Okay. Or on the rainbow of salt sand wave. This is a kind of scientific fact that he makes reference to. That when sometimes sunlight falls on the damp sand, that creates a kind of rainbow color sometimes, in a sense. So the kind of beauty of the rainbow colors which are sometimes created by the falling of sunlight on the damp sand, in a sense. So that kind of image of rainbow is also a kind of moment to cherish, a beautiful sight that one can look for. But is this rainbow perpetual? It exists for a very brief while. So it is not actually permanent, but fugacious, short-lived. So the image of beauty carries with it the seeds of melancholy. Third suggestion, or on the wealth of globed peonies. Peony is a type of plant that produces a kind of globular flowers. So when you look at a kind of wealth of peony flowers, in a sense, which are globular, that is why he is saying globed, golakar, the flowers red in color. So that is another image of beauty. The round shaped flowers, sometimes of red, sometimes it can be of white. So these flowers of peony plants, if you watch them, the kind of accumulation, the gathering of such large number of peony flowers, then your mind is refreshed. But these flowers also, they actually die after a certain point of time. They fade away, they wither away. They do not remain in that position perpetually. Last suggestion, or if, these are all hypothetical suggestions, or if thy mistress some rich anger shows, imprison her soft hand, let her rave, and feed deep, deep upon her peerless eyes. These lines are very sensuous indeed. If you have any mistress and if she is sometimes angry with you, at that point of time you should enjoy, because you should look at her beautiful face when she gets angry, in a sense. So let her rave, you should hold her hand. That might make her more angry, and she might go on ranting, raving, repeatedly. But in that moment, you should feed deep, deep upon her peerless. Peerless means without comparison, unparalleled in a sense, eyes. So when she is actually angry with you or actually raving at you, you should hold her hand and actually look at her face. Because that kind of anger, kind of inducing mood will create a kind of beautiful, exquisite, unparalleled sight of beauty, and this is short-lived as short-lived is her anger. This is the fourth suggestion. J. Feed on the bewitching, beautiful eyes of your beloved, because this beauty is transitory as her anger is transitory. So you cannot differentiate which one is beautiful and which one is painful. Generally we do that. We think in terms of binaries. You have read about structuralism, 0-1, that Saussurean models. You always think of binaries. A kind of image of flower is a kind of beautiful sight, so it is an image of beauty. And generally a kind of image of skull is a kind of image of melancholy. A dead body is an image of melancholy, in a sense. Keats is deconstructing, in a sense, such kind of clear-cut binaries. Keats is in a sense deconstructing such cherished ideologies. We should not do that, because the effect of melancholy you will be deprived of. Your mind will be deprived of the effect of melancholy, the true taste of melancholy, in a sense. Any question up to this? Okay. Next, the third line, where he actually, in a sense, gives out the moral of this poem. But look at the way it is a kind of method of actually induction, not actually deduction. So he actually makes a kind of inference out of such examples, that she dwells with beauty, she is melancholy. Melancholy is personified as female, as Keats always personifies every object of beauty as a female. So she dwells with beauty, beauty that must die. This line is very proverbial. বহুবার এটা আগে আসতো পরীক্ষায় for actually artists. She dwells with beauty, beauty that must die, and joy whose hand is ever at his lips, bidding adieu and aching pleasure nigh, nigh means near, turning to poison while the bee-mouth sips. Here you get three personifications. Melancholy as a kind of a woman, beauty is personified, and joy, capital দেখে আমরা বুঝতে পারছি. So she dwells with beauty, that means melancholy always lives with, dwells with the kind of object of beauty, and beauty that must die. Every object of beauty is short-lived, momentary, fragmentary, evanescent, fugacious. So this realization one does not make generally. This is a kind of properly educated soul can do that. A properly educated soul can come to a realization of this mixture of joy and sorrow in our life. That is why you should not turn away from painful thoughts, and generally you should not also make this kind of effect of melancholy antidoted by taking a kind of anodyne. Okay, and look at joy. The image of joy is very graphically presented. Joy is a male person because he is saying his. So she is melancholy, female, and joy is male. So joy, look at the image of joy. Keats has also presented a kind of graphical image of joy. Perhaps you can imagine joy as a kind of boy. A boy who is out there to extract every pleasurable things from life, in a sense. So joy whose hand is ever at his lips, bidding adieu. Adieu is a French word, means farewell. And aching pleasure nigh. Can any one of you say that what is the figure of speech that one can find in this phrase, aching pleasure? শুধু এইটুকুর মধ্যে.
অক্সিমোরন স্যার।
মেটাফর।
Very good, Prosenjit.
মেটাফর।
It is না, মেটাফর কি করে হচ্ছে? এটা হচ্ছে oxymoron, in a sense, because ache means what? My heart aches, it says in a kind of ode to Nightingale. So painful pleasure, in a sense. So these are apparently contradictory ideas placed side by side for a kind of emphasis. So aching pleasure nigh, near, turning to poison. আচ্ছা, এটা আমি পরে ব্যাখ্যা করছি, while the bee mouth sips. So look at from line number 22 to 24. Joy whose hand is ever at his lips. So this is the image of joy. Joy is a kind of boy who is always for total enjoyment, and the attitude of joy is not one of welcome but one of farewell, because it is very short-lived. Joy is always taking a kind of leave of us, in a sense, always kind of getting away from us, in a sense. And aching pleasure nigh, that means turning to poison, that as what he writes in the next line. As you can understand if you have read Grecianan or other texts too, ভালো রয়েছে এখানে the kind of explanation of this. সেটা হচ্ছে যে as soon as the pleasure is satiated, চরিতার্থ করা হয়ে যাচ্ছে, পাওয়া হয়ে যাচ্ছে, as soon as the pleasure is got, the pleasure turns to poison. Think of anything when you are actually in the process of getting it. There lies the kind of expectancy, there lies the pleasure. But if you have it, in a sense, after you get that kind of coveted thing, remember that pleasure is gone. Think in this way. Think of anything that you want to have in life. For example, degree, the kind of first class degree in masters. But as soon as you get it, remember, after 2 years, then remember that you will not get any pleasure. The pleasure actually lies in the act of persuasion, in the act of these kinds of pursuing that ideal. Keats is saying in Grecian Urn that heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. যেগুলো শুনছি যেসব মিউজিক সেগুলো সুন্দর, বাট যেগুলো শোনা যায় না সেগুলো আরো বেশি সুন্দর, because that creates the room for imagination. Because in the unheard music is there a kind of archetypical perfection in a sense. And so aching pleasure nigh, the moment you get the pleasure, the moment you actually take the cup of pleasure to the full, the kind of dregs that remain in that cup, they are very poisonous. Think of Keats on the kind of example that the act of love making. When it is over, the kind of it does not have any pleasure in a sense. In Grecian and some glimpses of it you can find. So aching pleasure nigh, turning to poison. This is the role of kind of joy in a sense. Joy is evanescent, and joy ultimately is changed into a kind of poison in a sense after a short time when it is satiated in a sense. So anything which is beautiful must have a tinge of melancholy. Mane such kind of unmixed happiness of a Mr. Shuk is not possible. Anything that is delightful is found in its pure form without being unmixed with sadness. This is actually not possible, not desirable at the same time. So while the bee mouth sips, bee is the image of pleasure seeker you can always find. Bee image is a recurrent image in Keats's poetry. Think of To Autumn. In that poem, when you get a reference to the bees, the bees are thinking it is summer. It is actually kind of summer time is going on. They don't realize that those happy time is gone. So whenever the bee is that actual image of human being who is always caught up within that kind of domain of pleasure, who does not want to realize that sadness is also there when you are enjoying. So just as a kind of bee sucks forth honey out of flowers, similarly human beings enjoy, derive whatever pleasurable things that they are getting out of life. But they don't realize that in the act of persuasion lies that kind of aching pleasure. If you look at a kind of beautiful object of beauty, this is the kind of inherent response of the human heart that you want to destroy it. You want to destroy that object of beauty. This is a kind of psychological truth. Keats is not saying that. Just don't have it. Don't experience it. If you have that cup of pleasure, if you drink that cup of pleasure to the full, then that cup of pleasure will become like poison. Think of Macbeth in a sense. The kind of expectation and the reality that got fulfilled in a sense. He became king, but the kingdom, that kind of kingdom, but kingship in a sense, was like a kind of poisonous head on his actually. It was like a poisonous crown on his head. So while the bee mouth sips, this is the image of ignorance. Keats is training our senses. Think of that chamber of maiden thought, that kind of letter, where those uninitiated people consider life as kind of only beautiful kind of domain, but they don't realize that what lies beyond that chamber of maiden thought. I, in the very temple of delight, veiled melancholy has her sovereign মানে হচ্ছে sovereign, আর কি করে লিখছেন shrine. Shrine means a kind of murti. Those sin of none save him whose strenuous tongue can burst joy's grape against his palate fine. His soul shall taste the sadness of her might, and be among her cloudy trophies hung. So these are the last few lines of this third stanza. There Keats is saying that in the temple of delight, failed melancholy has a sovereign shrine. Perhaps you want to go to the temple of joy, happiness. You want to visit the God joy, God delight in a sense. So there is a temple of joy. Perhaps you have gone there and is worshipping that God. But you forget, but you cannot recognize that within the temple, behind this God delight, there also lies another person, another goddess, whose face is veiled like Moneta in Fall of Hyperion, in Keats's long poem, a kind of unfinished epic. Moneta is a kind of image, but a kind of symbol which was introduced as Mnemosyne in Hyperion and Fall of Hyperion তিনি বলছেন তাকে মনেটা সেই যে realization বা conversation with Moneta actually directs Keats to the life. Moneta gives that kind of counsel to the poet. যাই হোক, so veiled melancholy has a sovereign shrine, though sin of none save him. Generally, those people who are uninitiated, they cannot see the goddess Melancholy with a veil on her face. Except those, save মানে হচ্ছে except him whose strenuous tongue can burst joyous grape against his palate fine, his soul shall taste the sadness of her might. So you know about palates in linguistics, hard palates, soft palates, etc. So except those individuals who are properly educated, whose senses are properly trained, educated, they can realize that when they are kind of bursting joy's grape against his palate, when they are actually squeezing the pleasures of life, one is also getting the flavor of melancholy simultaneously. You should not go for melancholy actually cutting aloof from such kind of joyous things. Within these things, when you are having kind of grape, which is very joyful in a sense, just for making it kind of simplified, these kinds of complex last three lines. So when you are enjoying such grapes of joy, that individual who knows about these, that within these actually lies sadness or melancholy, one can venerate goddess Melancholy at the same time. And if you are kind of uninitiated, you cannot recognize her. So line number 29, his soul. So whose soul? The person who is properly trained, that kind of individual. She is a kind of perfect connoisseur. He is kind of perfect person to get the real pleasant kind of pain of sadness. This is the kind of বলতে পারো যে paradox of this poem, as Clint Brooks has pointed out. Clint Brooks is a kind of formalist thinker. He says that the whole poem is built on a paradox, because it is the paradoxical realization that beauty lies with melancholy that makes this ode so beautiful. So his soul shall taste the sadness of her, means melancholy, might, তার যে full flavor, full force, only that individual can understand. That so this is a kind of confirmation of Keats's ideology, that melancholy and joy, they are inseparable, and in the temple of joy one can find the goddess Melancholy. So those who are going to the temple to worship the goddess of joy, they also worship the goddess of melancholy. So they are not opposite to each other. They are tested simultaneously. And B, among her cloudy trophies hung. This is a very interesting image that he uses at the end of the text. Anyone wants to have any suggestion regarding the last line? What is their understanding of the line number 30? And B, among her cloudy trophies hung. Okay, this is the line which has perplexed many critics to decode what he wanted to mean. What is trophy, what is cloudy trophy, এবং সেখানে যে হ্যাঙ্গিং এর কথা বলছে সেটা কি জিনিস? You should imagine that goddess Melancholy has a temple, and in that temple she actually hangs many trophies, many proudest possessions in a sense. Okay, trophies are like those mementos in a sense, means. So just the first comparison is that those properly trained individual, those who know about this, perhaps after reading this poem all of you can understand your souls are actually kind of purified in a sense. So those super sensitive individuals, and think of their souls. So Keats is not talking about the whole bodies but the souls which are there. You know about that parable of soul making, the sparks converted into soul through a kind of proper aesthetic medium. So this is a kind of soul of those super sensitive individuals which are compared to clouds at first, and such clouds, that means which contain the soul, are hung as trophies in the temple of melancholy. Goddess Melancholy সেই সব পিউরিফাইড পিপলদের সোলগুলোকে অনেকটা সেই কুডস যেমন করে তার ইনার টেম্পল, তার ইনার যে স্টেশন, সেখানে যেমন চারপাশে সেই মানুষের মুন্ডু দিয়ে পরিবেষ্টন করে রেখেছিল, গডেস মেলাঙ্কলি তার মন্দির পরিবেষ্টন করে রাখছে হচ্ছে পিউরিফাইড সোলদের দিয়ে। তাদের হচ্ছে এরকম ট্রফির মতো ঝুলিয়ে রাখছে মন্দিরের বাইরে। সো দিজ আর মাই গ্রেটেস্ট গিফটস, দ্যাট দিস পিপল অ্যাট লিস্ট নো দ্যাট হোয়ার অ্যাকচুয়ালি ট্রু aesthetics lies. So these are the trophies of actually a kind of prize or a kind of gift in a sense. So this is a kind of beautiful image that Keats ends this poem with. So with a kind of beautiful image, Keats wants to mean that the souls of these super sensitive individuals are like trophies which are hanging in the shrine of melancholy, because they are properly educated. And that is why Stephen Spender says that Keats's odes do not suggest us a kind of escape from suffering, but they do justify the kind of sufferings in our life. So Keats is not taking us to have an antidote to suffering, get oblivious of that, but how can we can actually feed our suffering, sorrows, our melancholies, and where can we find her? So the goddess Melancholy, ultimately think of that original deleted first stanza where the knight is on a quest to find the kind of goddess Melancholy. So the quest is ultimately ends on a note of positivity. The quest is fulfilled, that তাকে পাওয়ার জন্য আমাদের ওই রকম জায়গায় যাওয়ার প্রয়োজন নেই, বরঞ্চ goddess Melancholy resides with a kind of veil on her face in the temple of joy. So this is the kind of theme of this short poem. Now if you have any question from it, you can ask.